Now, we had discussed in our last episode that Arabia was a tribal society. The Arabs were divided into tribes. What is a tribe? A tribe is a group of descendants from a specific individual. That individual somehow achieved some fame in his life. He did something that made him stand up from other people. So if he had many children, those children after him would call themselves, we are the sons of so-and-so. We are the sons of so-and-so. And eventually those sons would become, we are the tribe of so-and-so. So the tribes are actually mini clans, mini dynasties. And all of the Arab tribes were somehow related to one another. You see, the Arabs, as we said, are the descendants of one particular person by the name of Adnan. Adnan was one of the descendants of the Prophet Ismail. The descendants of Adnan, all of them, they are the Arabs. And so the descendants of Adnan themselves were divided into many, many different tribes. Dozens and dozens of them. And under every major tribe, there were sub-tribes. So for example, the most famous of all of the tribes of Arabia was the tribe of the Quraysh. The reason they were famous were for many reasons. But most importantly, the Quraysh were the custodians of the Kaaba. They were the ones who lived in Mecca. They had the control of the sanctity of the holy city of Mecca. And this gave them the prestige over all other tribes. This was the major tribe. Within the Quraysh, there were many sub-tribes. There was the Banu Abd ad-Dar, there was the Banu Abdul Muttalib, there was the Banu Hashim. These sub-tribes, all of them are Quraysh. The Banu Umayyah, these are all sub-tribes of the Quraysh. But each of them had a certain ancestor within the children of Quraysh. Within these dynasties, they were mini clans, mini families. And the grandfather of the Prophet ﷺ belonged to the tribe of Quraysh and the sub-tribe of the Banu Hashim. The grandfather of the Prophet ﷺ was called Abd al-Muttalib. Abd al-Muttalib was his grandfather. And as a young man, certain things happened to him that made him a leader and a chieftain. And in fact, Abd al-Muttalib achieved a level of prestige that no other Arab before him had. Arabia never had a king. The tribes of Arabia were never united. They were all warring factions. But some tribes prevailed over others. And the Quraysh, as we said, was the most prestigious. Abd al-Muttalib in his lifetime managed to increase the prestige of the Quraysh. And also, because of certain incidents, he increased in his own prestige until he became the leader of the Quraysh, the chieftain of the Quraysh, entire Quraysh tribe. As we said, there was no king. So he didn't become the king of the Arabs. He didn't become the leader of all the Arab tribes. What he became was the chieftain, was the leader of one tribe, the Quraysh. The earliest things that happened to him is that as a young man, when he didn't have many children, he only had one son at that time. What happened was, he happened to rediscover the well of Zamzam. And this leads to the question, what is Zamzam and what is the well of Zamzam? So we have to go back in history and then come back to this point. We have to go back in history thousands of years and talk about the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. When he first came to Mecca, he left his wife Hajar and their baby Ismail, and he went back to Jerusalem, to the Holy Land where he lived. At this point in time, Hajar only had a little bit of food and a little bit of water. And after a while, the water ran out and the food ran out. And the baby Ismail was crying for water, thirsty. And Hajar ran out of milk from her own breasts, and there was nothing to give the child. And so Hajar, in desperation, she walked to a close-by mountain, and that mountain was called Safa. And she looked around, perhaps there's a traveler, perhaps there's a caravan, nothing. And so she saw another mountain in the distance called Marwa. And so she ran down between Safa to Marwa. And she looked again, and the baby is crying far away. And so she continued to run between Safa and Marwa. She continued to run between Safa and Marwa. 7 times she ran, running between Safa and Marwa. And to this day, we imitate her practice. We follow what she had done, walking between Safa and Marwa. And between 2 specific areas, we run between them as well to commemorate and to remember what the mother of the Prophet Ismail did in her search for water, running between Safa and Marwa. but she didn't find any caravan. She didn't find any trace of human being, any trace of life. Desperate, she came back, and there, lo and behold, Ismail, the baby, Allah Azza wa Jal willed that a fountain spring forth from under his feet. A fountain of pure, beautiful, cold water spring forth. And the fountain continued to spread and continued to flow from out of the ground. And so, worried that the fountain would disperse, she started packing it up with sand around it. And she said in her language, stop, stop. And that was zam, zam. Now, what happened was that somewhere in between the time of Ismail and Abdul Muttalib, we don't know exactly when, perhaps 150 years or so, before the time of Abdul Muttalib, an attack was launched against Mecca and against the Quraysh by an enemy, non-Arabs, outside of Arabia. And in desperation, the Quraysh, the original Quraysh tribe, the pre-Abdul Muttalib tribe in Mecca, they buried the well of Zamzam. They had to evacuate the city. And they buried their treasures under the Kaaba. Lots of gold and lots of belongings that they couldn't carry. And they covered up the well of Zamzam. They left it without any trace. They threw sand and they threw all of their things so that there was no trace of water. Why? So that when that tribe came, they could not find it. And they could not live in Mecca. So they had to leave. So eventually, they were able to come back to Mecca. The original Quraysh were able to come back. But, subhanallah, Allah willed, they could not find Zamzam again. They could not find Zamzam. It was lost now, completely. So for a generation or two, they had a lot of difficulty obtaining water. And because it was their city, they were now used to living there, they continued to live there. But water was scarce, and water was found with great, great difficulty. Until finally this young man by the name of Abdul Muttalib one day was sleeping next to the Kaaba, and he saw in a dream that there was the well of Zamzam. And he woke up, but he didn't know where it was. The next day he saw again that he's digging a well, and the well sprouts forth, but it didn't tell him where. For the third time, but this time he saw an angel, he saw a person, a figure, and he said, where is this? What is this well? And they told him, the well is between this and that location, exactly, precisely. So they told him a land, and of course, an area. And of course, this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He wanted to bless Abdul Muttalib. And so Abdul Muttalib, as a young man, and he had with him only a young son, he did not have a lot of children, he took his son with him, and they began to dig up in this place. The Quraysh came and surrounded him and said, what are you doing? What is this? What are you digging in the middle of this sand for? Abdul Muttalib said, I saw in a dream that I am uncovering Zamzam. But they laughed and ridiculed him. They had not seen water in Mecca for a generation or two. And you are now going to discover it because of a dream. And so they let him be. But eventually, he struck it. And the water began to flow out. And that was when the Quraysh surrounded him. And they said, this is our well. It's not your well. This is our well. It is our property. We need to take a short break now. As soon as we come back, we'll continue our story. Stay with us.